Hello, my name is Tom Lahoud. Thank you so much for joining me today to discuss the role of structured equation modeling in defining the importance performance map analysis for users who are adopting a wearable electrocardiogram authentication device. In this presentation, I'll be going over persistent threats that are part of why the study started, what the ECG wearable device can do to help define a framework, and how the importance performance map analysis assists decision makers in selecting a system or a platform to use for authentication using ECG. In the first part, we'll be talking about the persistent PII threats. And this is something that we often see in the news media where there are significant threats that occur to retailers, major organizations. The most alarming information that we receive is the fact that the data breaches are discovered several days or several weeks or even months after they have occurred, creating a much difficult situation to help mitigate those losses or those breaches. With electrocardiogram, the framework that I've created studied a variety of factors by extending the technology acceptance model. And it also uses the QRS signature as the waveform, which is unique to individuals. It's very difficult to forge. It is an indicator of the aliveness of the subject who is being authenticated. And unlike fingerprint, a retinal scan, or voice print, it is again very difficult to forge. The model itself used an extension of the technology acceptance framework by looking at the indicators for a variety of constructs such as perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, subjective norm, attitude towards use, behavioral intent, experience, and perceived risk. In using a variety of statistical approaches, I've determined the validity and the predictive nature of the model by looking at the Cronbach's alpha, studying the indicator weights, composite reliability, path coefficients, blindfolding, as well as bootstrapping. And when I got to the importance performance analysis map, I was able to determine which of these factors are critical for decision makers. The IPMA, importance performance map analysis, relies on a grid or a matrix. It is composed of 4 quadrants where essentially anything that falls into the high importance with the high performance segment of that matrix in that quadrant, that is, would be latent variables exhibiting characteristics that are critical to the model's successful implementation. So for decision makers, when they are looking to strategize, plan, and budget for an implementation, those would be the factors that would be considered as critical success factors. Anything the opposite side of the quadrant, such as low performance or low importance, would not be considered, would need to be removed from the model. And that's why the model I created, it can be used to determine in a study such as the one I performed, what is of high importance versus what is low importance, what is of high performance versus what is of low performance, and also the mixture of both, which is on the top left and the bottom right of the matrix itself. For example, for attitude, as you can see, the performance importance for that construct when it came to studying, for example, perceived ease of use, we had 2 opposing numbers, 28% for importance and 76% performance. So these did not quite match. In other words, in this case, there is a relationship between the two, but what is more critical for the decision maker is the performance of a factor versus it's not as critical or as important in this case. As you can see, it falls into the proper quadrant that validates the actual decision to be made. So in this case, the stakeholders' intervention is needed in this case versus what is it not needed. So that's in this case, it's not as critical, for example, as other things that may fall in the quadrants on the far right-hand side, or I should say the upper right-hand side. This is also evident for behavioral intent that fell into the high importance, low performance quadrant. For perceived ease of use and for subjective norm, so those were not critical. As far as perceived ease of use and a relationship to experience, subjective norm, that was the complete opposite. There was a direct a relationship in high importance and high performance for both, as well as for perceived risk versus experience. And finally, for perceived use, when it comes to experience, perceived ease of use, and subjective norm, those also fell into the high importance and low performance quadrant. Finally, also there is a subjective norm falling into the high importance, which is actually makes a lot of sense because subjective norm is about peer pressure, is about your colleagues or friends and family members also using devices similar. So that means that you also would feel compelled to use them. So in summary, interventions from stakeholders to increase attitude, increase BI, behavioral intent, and perceived usefulness were important and discovered properly in the importance performance map analysis. For anyone who's interested in extending the research, these are some opportunities as well as some conclusions I'd like to share. Thank you so much for your time.